Mercury is in retrograde. It's in the microwave. It's in the lemonade. Mercury's here and we're not happy about it.
There's magic coming. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast. This is a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rorie Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we will begin the Witchy Weather Report, but first, a shout-out to our patrons. I'm so grateful that you're in my life. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so that they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them answered in real time. They also get access to my witchy Discord server, where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and also share pictures of our pets, and a shout out in every episode. Here we go! Thank you, Amanda Curry, Melissa Marie Imagery, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Millie Orozco, Ruby, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, Brittany Campbell, Ondine PM, and D. Ann Miller. I'm so grateful that you are in my world. In just a moment, we're going to get to the Witchy Weather Report. Our topic of the day is about cultivating faith in yourself. But let's go for the Witchy Weather Report. I'm reading today from the Everyday Witch Tarot, which is it's my go-to good feeling deck. Hello, artistic me. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in, Brittany. Thank you, patrons, for tuning in. I don't always know who's who with different handles, but as I just mentioned, this is live for patrons, so I'm really glad that you're here. I'm reading from the Everyday Witch Tarot today for our Witchy Weather Report. Here comes a shuffle. As I record this, it is April 7th, 2024, and so a little witchy weather report of the moment is that Mercury is in the microwave, as evidenced by the fact that I started the podcast 10 minutes late. It's Rachel. Hi, Rachel. As evidence that I started the podcast 10 minutes late, Mercury is in the microwave, meaning that you may experience difficulties and confusion and things just not seeming to work right around technology, communication, transportation. I am running a podcast, and so technology and communication both play in, and I've had a time of it with a few things this Mercury retrograde. What I'd like to share with you is, and if you tuned in for the Witchy Weather Report broadcast on social media yesterday, you already heard this, but here's how I like to play Mercury retrograde. First of all, my most important thing to keep in mind is that I can't control what is happening externally. I can't control what is being thrown at me. I can only control my response to it. The second thing I choose to believe during Mercury retrograde, this is a belief that I choose to take on, and if you know me, you know I'm all about chosen beliefs, is that if there's a universe or a deity or any kind of wiser, higher being that is conspiring for or against me, I choose to believe that this energy is conspiring in my favor and that slowdowns are either divine timing or there to teach me something. I choose to believe this because it's a useful belief. I choose to believe this because it encourages me then to stop when I have a problem and ask myself, what can I learn here? And having that mindset going through life has proven very useful to me. I don't choose it because I think I'm right. I just choose it because I think it's helpful. The other thing you may wish to know, if you're listening to this in somewhat real time, if you're listening live, we have a solar eclipse tomorrow. If you're listening after it comes out, we may have just had a solar eclipse. What happens during an eclipse? The moon moves in front of the sun and blocks it from our light briefly, and this just happens with the alignment of planets. Like, the moon isn't actually like jumping in front of the sun, it's just the way the planets are, like our planet, the moon and the sun happen to be aligned at that moment. And what happens is we have this crisis of consciousness, As the sun is blocked from us, we have this sense of our vision not being fully clear, our ability to discern exactly what's happening, being in shadow and being confused. Then, as things clear up, literally, as the sun is uncovered again, we begin to understand things in a new light, in a new context. We begin to recontextualize different parts of our life. New information may come to light, or it may simply be a new perspective that comes to light, allowing us to see more clearly. So I encourage you, if you're listening in real time or close to real time, to approach these next few days and even next few weeks with an attitude of curiosity and with an attitude of slow and steady movement. We are moving slowly and steadily so that we can reconnoiter if we need to. We are moving slowly and steadily so that if something happens and we need to reconsider, we can give ourselves an opportunity to pause and reconsider. We don't have to be moving forward at all times. We can take a moment of stillness and reflect, and then choose to fine tune our direction, because new information will be coming to light. Old information will be placed in a new light and recontextualized, and we have an opportunity to respond to this thoughtfully if we are willing to move more slowly through life. So that's my invitation to you. And it may even be a delicious invitation if you're like me and you feel like sometimes life happens at a breakneck pace. If we choose to move more slowly through life, nothing bad happens. I can give you that guarantee. It's not actually the end of the world. In fact, we may find that everything gets a smidgen easier. With that said, I am going to pull a card for us all, and my intention, whenever you're listening to this podcast, whether you're listening to it live with me or whether you're 5 years down the line binging through SassafrasCast because you discovered me, if so, thank you. My intention is that whenever and wherever this card reaches you, that it has meaning for you right here in the moment. The card here is the Four of Pentacles. Now, I will say that we have some interesting big four energy right now. And I say that because yesterday in the Witchy Weather Report, we received the Four of Cups as our look ahead card. So what I want to say is fours are about the intersection of action and inaction, work and play, putting out versus taking in and replenishing. There's an element of balancing the scales, of balancing our energy, our inputs and our outputs when fours are at play. Now, the Four of Pentacles suggests to us that we guard our resources carefully and consider our own stability both now and in the future in any decisions that we make. It's not a time to gamble in such a way that puts all our eggs in one basket. It's not a time to throw all of our time and energy at something to the point where we're depleted. Rather, it's time to hold some back for us, which I hope we do regularly, right? I hope that when we think about giving our best to life, that we understand, because this took me some time to learn, that giving our best to life doesn't mean pushing ourselves until we're so depleted we can push no more. That's not giving our best. That is overdoing it. That's overworking our end. That's trying to hold up more than our end of the table. And it's not our best because there's diminishing returns, right? You can only do that for so long. It's not sustainable. If it's not sustainable, it's not our best. Our best is doing what we can at a pace that is sustainable for us, in alignment with our values and beliefs, and is also our self-care. So you're invited right now to take a little moment to refocus on what your resources are. And resources are not just money, but money's certainly a part of it. It's money, it's time, it's energy. It's all those things that make you feel core stable. So it's also your core relationships in life, right? Because if your core relationships are kind of messed up, then your life feels kind of messed up, even if nothing else is technically wrong. It's very hard to feel stable. What makes us feel stable? Knowing that we have enough money in the bank to pay our rent or our mortgage, knowing that we are going to be able to continue putting food in our bodies, knowing that we'll be able to get a good night's sleep tonight, right? And those things will continue to feed ourselves, will continue to have shelter, will continue to have a good night's sleep. They are dependent on money. They're also dependent on time. They're also dependent on like energy output, right? We can't sleep well, even if we have the 8 hours to sleep and a bed to sleep in, if something is keeping us up at night because we're full of anxiety, right? So anything that contributes to your stability right now, just take stock and really treat it as sacred. That's my best advice to you, is to treat your resources as sacred and respectfully steward them. That has been the Witchy Weather Report. Let's move into our topic of the day. Our topic of the day is cultivating faith in yourself. This is a favorite topic of mine. It's funny, I was just performing. I'm a singer-songwriter, as I think you know. I was performing in a Songwriters in the Round thing yesterday at Rockwood Music Hall, and one of my fellow songwriters said, oh, when it comes to songs, there's basically only a few categories. And she listed categories that we probably all would think of. She listed, like, I love you. Goodbye, I actually hate you. That's another category. Sex as another category. And it came up during the course of our round. Like, then it was kind of a topic of discussion where we're like, let's see what category this song fits in. And it came up that for me, a lot of my songs fit into the category of like personal empowerment, like stepping up and owning and claiming your power. And that's not a surprise to me. That's what my whole career is about in every single way, including this podcast. And so right now, when I'm talking about cultivating faith in yourself, it's something that I'm talking about as someone who had to work hard for that because it wasn't handed to me. I think there are ways that children can be raised to have faith in themselves. And I don't think that children come out necessarily not having faith in themselves. I think children enter the world trusting in their perceptions to the extent that they're able. They may not understand everything they're perceiving, right? But they don't gaslight themselves about it. If they think it's cold, they're like, it's cold, right? They believe in themselves. And depending on then how their caretakers treat them and how others around them treat them when they share their points of view, children may their own faith in themselves may grow or diminish. And so for most of us as adults, cultivating faith in ourselves can be a tricky ballgame because there's a lot of psychology piled onto that from the time we were quite young. There's a lot of, my friend Patty Bell would call it trance piled onto us, meaning that we have these beliefs that were kind of given to us over time in our childhood at different times during our upbringing that have just kind of entered into our brain space as the lens that we see the world through. And faith in ourselves as adults is something that is worth cultivating. And if you grew up in such a way or have had experiences in such a way that challenged your own perceptions, that challenged your faith in yourself, that challenged your ability to believe in yourself and trust in yourself, then it's more important than ever. And I'm someone who's had to struggle to claim faith in myself. And my personal belief is that we learn most from people who have struggled with a topic. I know that's been true for me. I've learned most from people who are like, I struggled with this, here's how I got past it. Rather than somebody who doesn't have a struggle with it. And they might try to give you advice, but it won't be helpful because they haven't faced what you're facing. An example is, as somebody who has anxiety about a number of different topics, it's a diagnosed situation. My therapist told me I had anxiety. I didn't know it. But when I speak about that, I have had very well-meaning friends tell me, oh, just relax and don't worry about that. And I think anyone with anxiety can agree that that's possibly the least helpful advice ever, right? Like, oh, now that you've told me to just relax, well, I didn't even know that was a choice. Like, it's not that simple, right? However, I have received great advice on working with my anxiety from other people who have suffered from anxiety because they understand what I'm going through and are like, here's how I've been able to either mitigate the symptoms or make things more comfortable for myself along the way. So that's the name of the game, is learning from someone who has gone through the struggle. So let's talk about cultivating faith in yourself. I want to talk today about how showing up for your biggest life requires taking leaps of faith. And it's not just external faith. And I think that this is a message that really gets lost. It's about having faith in yourself. It's about trusting yourself to land on your feet and have your own back. And there's a lot of trust the universe energy out there. There's a lot of like, I'm in kind of, the new age spiritual space, and to some extent, like, I guess like a positive psychology kind of space. I kind of like, I get a lot of information from that world on the internet and stuff like that, and the people I surround myself with. And we have the sense of like trust, like have faith that things will work out, which is like kind of along the lines of trust in the universe, trust in God if you believe in God, trust in your guides or your guardian spirits. And there's not a lot of have faith in yourself messaging. And I think that's the most important faith to have. Because in truth, friends, we can't always trust that the universe will work things out in a way that feels great for us. That's not reality, right? Here in New York, we had an earthquake a couple days ago, and it's rare for us to have an earthquake, so it was like a big deal and everyone's talking about it. And it also isn't a big deal, and when I say that, what I mean is on Long Island, I think the epicenter of the earthquake was in New Jersey, and so I do have some friends in Jersey who like had a more serious shake than I had, Here on Long Island, like a pillow fell on the floor in my bedroom. I was like, we will rebuild. Like, it shook us up. Literally, it shook us up. And then, like, emotionally, we were like, wow, what was that? But it wasn't very dramatic. And yet, it's a reminder that at any moment, the things that we trust to be stable and hold us up could not be, right? We could experience a shakeup at any moment. And that's in the tarot defined by the Tower card, which really is about the falling of the tower, right? Like structures that we trust to support us crumbling down. And when that happens, it's terrifying for us because we've put our faith in those structures, right? We've put our faith in perhaps a job to keep providing for us, and then suddenly one day we get laid off, which, by the way, is how layoffs work. I used to work in a big tech company. I made it through several rounds of layoffs, which is just sheer luck because layoffs are they're based on factors other than whether you're a good employee. They're based on a variety of factors, largely having to do with the company's budget, And several rounds of layoffs happened, and I was there for each one and happened to make it through several. And what happens when you get laid off is that you walk into your job and it's a normal day, and then you get an email. Like these days it's an email, like it used to be a piece of paper or a pink slip, that basically is like, hey, have a great day. You don't work here anymore. And often with layoffs, there's some kind of a package where it's like, oh, like we're going to, give you some severance, whatever, it's like it tries to soften the blow. But it really is this moment where it's like, oh, you thought you had a job that was going to provide for you and your family, and now you don't anymore. This structure that you've put your faith in is no longer stable. If we have faith in ourselves in that moment, that's less terrifying. If we have faith in ourselves, we're like, okay, this is going to be a tough time, but I'm going to figure it out. And if we've put all our strength in an external force, then we're counting on someone else or something else to figure it out for us, or counting on luck, and we're crossing our fingers, and we don't feel we have influence on the outcome. And that becomes terrifying. And we don't need to live in terror. So again, I'm talking about useful beliefs. It's a useful belief to cultivate faith in yourself. It's also, in my opinion, a meaningful belief that will actually make itself true. Now, here's a cliche. I'm going to share a few cliches with you, and I'm going to unpack them a little bit. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. This is a mindset cliche, right? But it is true. I have a lot of friends who are bad at math, or who would self-describe themselves as being bad at math. They're like, I'm not good at math. That stresses me out. When it comes time to calculate the tip, I'm the one calculating it. And that's very basic math. And it's because they're math makes them nervous. And what do you do when there's a topic that you don't feel you have a lot of skill around, and you're nervous about it, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this well? You're much more likely to make a foolish mistake. right? And that's actually independent of how good you are at it. You make the foolish mistake because you're like, oh, I'm nervous. And when you're nervous, you're less on your game, right? So all of my friends who tell me that they're bad at math, I know are at the very least high school graduates. And here in New York, we have something called the Regents, which is like a bunch of standardized tests, basically. And I know they had to pass the math Regents, and I know the math Regents has like geometry and algebra on there. I know it's like a pretty, like, there's some pretty real math on there, and they had to at least pass to get their degree, to get their diploma. And it's like, are you bad at math? Because you managed to do that, and that's pretty serious math, you know what I mean? Or is it that you feel like math is scary and struggle and you don't have faith in yourself around it? Now, do people have varying degrees of skill and ability on things? For sure, right? I have friends who probably did pass that math Regents like by the skin of their teeth, and I did pretty well on the math Regents. Well enough that I don't remember what grade I got because it wasn't traumatic for me and I expected to do well. It was less than 100, but it was higher than 85, and I know it was fine. You know what I mean? And when we cultivate confidence in ourselves, then we don't pack trauma and stress onto things that we're trying to do for ourselves, and it becomes easier for us to simply do them. Because if you're convinced, I'm terrible at math, or I'm a terrible test taker, that's another thing that affects some people, or I'm terrible at this. Now, those things may be true. You may be a little like your aptitude naturally for math may be lower than another person's. You may struggle with test taking because some of those things are triggers for you that make you anxiety and make you make foolish mistakes that don't actually reflect how well you understand the material, for example. Those things may be true. And also, it's true that it builds up in your mind when you're like, I'm not bad, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at this, and then it becomes really, really hard to execute. And that's when we choke, right? We go to do something we're intending to do well, and because in our head the script is, I'm gonna mess this up, I'm gonna mess this up, I'm gonna mess this up, like, of course we mess it up. It's like we have been training ourselves to mess it up. Now, that's not said to shame us for having areas where we feel nervous about our competence level. But it is said to remind us that if we cultivate more self-confidence, that we will move through life with greater ease, because we won't have that like psychological cocktail of stress and nerves around simply moving through life. Here are a couple of other cliches. Everything you want is on the other side of your comfort zone. I happen to hate this, and you've probably heard me complain about it, but it is a meaningful cliche. What it means is that you can't grow and stay 100% comfortable at the same time. That, to me, is a healthy interpretation of that cliche, right? We can't. Because in order to grow, we have to learn things we didn't know before. We have to be humble enough to understand I don't know as much as whatever I'm learning from or whomever I'm learning from. We have to be humble enough to challenge our existing beliefs because we're about to get more informed beliefs. And we also have to be humble enough to know that we might fuck up along the way. I curse on this podcast, by the way. There's the explicit rating right there. We have to be humble enough to know sometimes learning takes place via trial and error. And so we have to be willing to fail, because sometimes failure is something you have to do on the way to competence, right? When you were learning how to write in grade school, there were a lot of kids who would get their letters mixed up, wouldn't be able to write, would write a R backwards or something like that, would, have trouble staying in the lines. Those are all skills that we built, and we built them through trial and error by doing it repeatedly, right? This is how to make words. And, people have varying degrees of good or bad handwriting, but again, we all mastered it to the point where we could write a sentence and someone else could read it and understand what we wrote, right? We were all able to do that, and it took some failure along the way. We had to be willing to do it wrong a few times so that we could learn to do it right consistently. Nobody's perfect out of the box. So that challenges our comfort zone, right? It's uncomfortable to fail. It's uncomfortable to go into something knowing you won't get it right away. I have so many adults in my life who come to me and tell me I could never go on stage and sing like you do. I could never play guitar like you do. I can't carry a tune. I can't. And I'm like, what is it that makes you think you can't? Like, have you tried lessons? Have you tried, have you tried like these other things? And often they're just like, I can't. I just know I have no talent. And it's like, well, if not to be a jerk. And I try to say it nice, but it's like, if you tell yourself you have no talent, then you certainly don't, because you won't ever cultivate it. You know what I mean? And the people who have had the most success that I've watched become musically talented over the years, whether they're like my peers, other people I've seen performing, or whether they're students of myself or a friend, are people who are willing to be wrong. People who are willing to like have a little sense of humor about it and get it wrong a few times so that they can master it. They're willing to get it wrong 39 times so that the 40th time they can get it right. And they're willing to slow down and break it down and dumb it down for themselves so that over time they can build their skills. I used to have this guitar student when I was in my 20s, and one of the things I was teaching him to do was tune by ear. And he had this wonderful sense of humor about it where he would give it a go. He would give it a go to tune one string to another string, and then he'd be like, how am I doing, Rorie? Am I in the zip code? It was a very cute thing to say. He was comfortable with being wrong, and being willing to expand your comfort zone a little bit to include, I might be wrong, challenges our ego and is also what lets us grow. Now, the toxic side of that is putting yourself outside your comfort zone all the time is not something we should ask of any human, right? That looks like constant anxiety. That looks like burnout. That's exhausting. That too will lead to us making constant mistakes, because if we're constantly uncomfortable, there's no replenishment happening. We're just in survival mode. And that's like a higher stakes mode than we need to live in most of the time in our lives. So, like grain of salt. The final cliche I'm going to share with you, which is kind of the crux of what it's like to have faith in yourself, is feel the fear and do it anyway. Know you might get it wrong. Know you won't do it perfectly. Know that the universe might be stronger and bigger and badder than you, and trying anyway. So let's jump into the common thread here. The common thread is these cliche pieces of advice are asking you to cultivate faith in yourself. Every single person I know has experienced self-sabotage. That's a real thing. And also, every single person I know has shown up for themselves in the face of difficulty and challenges. So we're choosing to lean into reminding ourselves that we're capable of doing that, rather than leaning into the idea that we're going to fuck it up. Because we still might fuck it up. And there's a level of, when we have faith in ourselves, we have faith to know, even if I fuck it up, I can keep going. I'm making another music metaphor because I'm a musician and I can't help it. One of the earliest things that you learn when you're taking music lessons and preparing for a performance or recital is, if you mess up, keep going. That's something that gets really, really drilled into the heads of young musicians, because it's not a natural impulse. Most people mess up and they're like, oh crap, I messed up, I have to start over. If you mess up, keep going is really... it's a different mindset. It's a mindset we have to learn to embody. And it's what allows us at a recital, at a performance, or whatever, to hit a wrong note, laugh it off, and continue moving forward, right? And if we don't have that mindset of, I might mess up, because it acknowledges messing up is probably going to happen at some point. I don't know a single performer who doesn't feel that they mess up on stage. I feel like I mess up all the time on stage. I don't always feel that it is perceptible to other humans, because, first of all, I may, as a seasoned performer and longtime player, hold myself accountable to a higher standard than the audience may. But secondly, because I am no longer psychologically inclined to make it a big, horrible deal, right? If I mess up on stage, it's not panic for me. And that took some time to cultivate. Rather, I can mess up on stage and either make a joke about it if it's bad enough, make a joke about it, or simply move on with my life. And because I haven't made a big deal of it, it's not a big deal to those watching me. And that performance doesn't have to go down in history as a performance where I messed up. It can instead go down in history as a performance where overall things were good, even though they weren't perfect the whole time, right? And we like that energy a little bit better. And so that's faith in yourself. That's what faith in yourself begins to feel like. Part of it is feel the fear and do it anyway. Part of it is allow yourself to mess up and then keep going. What makes leaps of faith scary is that there is faith required. What makes stretching ourselves scary is that we don't know what will happen if we push ourselves beyond our known limits. Except, don't we? Because we've done it before, because we've all been children. Because we, at one point in our lives, did not know how to speak. At one point in our lives, we didn't know how to read. At one point in our lives, we did not know how to walk. We had to push ourselves into that very frightening skill building of like, if I walk, I might fall down, and kids fall down a lot, right? Especially when they're learning to walk. We had to push through in order to gain the ability to walk. And I think that we probably agree that it's worth doing that. You know, like it was worth it for us to push ourselves out of our comfort zone to gain an ability that would allow us to traverse the world with much greater ease. Haven't we actually pushed ourselves beyond our limits before? We've all had these experiences, and considering how these experiences went can teach us a lot about ourselves. If you're like me, it's a mixed bag, right? Like there's times when you knocked it out of the park and times when you crashed and burned, and also that might translate into stories. So for example, I've always been a reader. I don't remember when I started reading. I know it was before they taught you how to read in school. You know, I've just always been a reader. And I've always been kind of good at that kind of like scholarly academic pursuits. I've always had a little bit of a natural aptitude for it. And so I have confidence and competence around it more so than a lot of people, especially a lot of people who were raised female, even in my generation, feel. I feel that I'm intelligent because people around me told me I was intelligent, and because I was able to do things that quote unquote intelligent people do, right? Like I was able to succeed academically. People told me I was smart. I was able to believe them. And so this is a part of my self-worldview now. I'm an intelligent person. That's a very helpful belief to have, that you're an intelligent person who can figure things out, right? There are other areas in my life where I did not immediately succeed. Socially, there are times when the kid with her head in a book, who was like a little bit of a weird bookworm kid, didn't always know the right thing to say to make a classmate want to play with me, or know how to play in the way another classmate might want to play, or know how to engage, right? Or know how to approach somebody fresh. So socially, I didn't feel like I was as confident as I was in like an academic world. And these have become stories for me that affect me in my adult life. Like to this day, I feel like a smart bookie person, but I feel like an idiot if I walk into a room full of people, even having on purpose cultivated social skills along the way. And so that's something to know, right? When we think about like, well, where did I do well? Where did I crash and burn young and early? That can teach us a lot about our self-concept. And also it's something we can let go of, right? Because we've all had the experience of like, I used to be terrible about this, and now I learned I can be good at it. And I used to be great at this when I was a kid, but I just don't really care. So I haven't cultivated the skill very much, right? And we care about this because we deserve to cultivate comfort for ourselves moving towards a bigger and better life. We deserve to feel we can have a better life. It's really, really hard to get there if we don't feel that we can. So we cultivate comfort in uncomfortable situations. Are you with me? That's what we're doing. Leading your biggest, boldest life and living up to your full potential does start outside your comfort zone. And if we believe we can face down outside our comfort zone and survive, then we have a little more comfort outside our comfort zone. So we have this expansive viewpoint that allows us. And if we never try to do more than we feel easy about, then we never learn what we're truly capable of. If because I'm good at academic things and books and stuff like that, if I allowed that to be my entire world and I just told myself I'm a social idiot, I just hope other people will figure that out for me, but I'm good at books and stuff, I would have had a very, very different career than I've had. I would have had a very different adult life than I've had. Like, I'm a performer for a living. I connect with people for a living, right? And if I had told myself, I don't know how to do that, people can't connect with me, I'm a social moron, which I realize that language is kind of inflammatory and not okay. And perhaps I'm allowing myself to get away from it, get away with it because I'm saying it about myself, right? That's not an okay way to talk about yourself or anyone. But if I allowed myself to think those thoughts, I wouldn't have the career that I'm really, in my opinion, meant to have. Leading your biggest life involves doing things that you feel like you're not good at. And what happens when we don't push ourselves in that way is we accumulate regrets, and the regrets all start with, if only I had, if I had tried this, if I had given it a chance, if I'd given myself a chance. And in my opinion, I would rather have regrets that go like this. I tried this, and here's what happened. And it didn't work, right? Then regrets like, if I had tried this, who knows, right? Like that feeling of like, oh, if only I tried. Because I've experienced both types. And I feel less bad about one of them. You know what I mean? There are things I've tried to do that ultimately weren't right for me, or that I couldn't make work in my particular life and my particular circumstances, and I don't really regret trying them for the most part. Because now I have that information. Whereas there are things where I'm like, I don't know, could I do that? And I was too scared and I never tried. And sometimes you can never do that thing again, and you look back and you're like, how would my life have changed if I had given it a try? And you can go do new things now, right? You can say like, well, obviously that's a missed opportunity, I can go seek out opportunities like it, but it's heartbreaking to know that that one opportunity will never come back to you. And I've watched people get very bogged down in this type of regret. Anyway, this has been like a 40-minute preamble. Let's talk about how to do it. How do we cultivate a faith in ourselves? Let's talk about spiritual and let's talk about practical, because I'm about both. And you know, I believe in belief as something that we choose because it's helpful and useful. That's my personal psychological bent. That's what I find to be helpful for me. And you know, also, so my spiritual things and my rituals and stuff like that, all to me have a psychological component that backs them up, whether or not anything mystical is happening. That's who I am as a person. I'm a slightly skeptical person, but the bigger thing is that it helps me move forward in confidence that they're going to move the needle, right? Because I don't care. At the end of the day, if what I'm doing when I'm praying or when I'm casting a spell, if it's happening because someone is answering my prayers, or because I made energy magic happen and the spell happened because I cast it, or if things are happening because psychologically I programmed my subconscious mind to look for those opportunities and so I saw them. I don't care which thing happens. It doesn't matter because both of them get me the outcome I want. I really have an agnostic point of view about magic, as you know. So, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. I'm in the wrong place in my notes. Let's talk about practical ways. And let's talk about believing that you can because you have in the past. The very first practical thing you can do to cultivate belief in yourself is to listen to people's compliments and listen to their kind words. And then sit with it. Most people I know are uncomfortable with compliments. Listen to people's compliments, listen to people's kind words, and pay attention to the sensations in your body as you replay those moments. I hear you, Brittany. Brittany's saying this is a topic I have a difficult time with. You and me both. That's why I'm making the podcast. And I know there was a long preamble because it was like I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, as you know. So the first thing you can do is just listen to other people say nice things to you. And I'm not even going to ask you to believe in them. I'm just going to ask you to consider how you feel about them. Like, and in a very, very sensory way, Like, not even naming emotions, but just like allow yourself to replay the last kind of big compliment someone gave you, the last one that gave you a little bit of pause. And allow yourself to feel your feelings about it. Like, allow yourself to feel what's going on in your body. I had something happen last year, like a little over a year ago today, where I was at a show, and a friend of mine gave me a very, very meaningful, very big compliment. Meaningful because they have known me for over 15 years now. And so they're someone whose perception of me as a performer I put a lot of stock in, because they've been there for the journey. And big because it was very, very positive. It was about my growth, it was about my direction as an artist. And I remember being very aware during them giving me that compliment that I was checked out mentally. That I was like, this person is giving me a compliment. I should definitely smile and act happy to receive it, because emotionally I was not ready to process that meaningful of a compliment. And that actually helped me. It started me on like a whole journey of feeling my feelings. But more importantly, that moment of I'm getting a big compliment and I don't even know what to do with it told me there was more work to be done there. And just paying attention, just allowing yourself to feel what you feel as other people compliment you. I'm not even saying that it's like going to teach you what to next do. It's just going to teach you. It's going to allow your feelings to evolve, because your feelings are movement. Your feelings move through your body. And when I went on that journey of feeling my feelings in my body, after that fateful day where my friend gave me that compliment, I learned a lot about myself really, really fast, and it enabled me to identify areas where I was like selling myself short. It enabled me to identify areas where I was being too hard on myself. And just like it just happened naturally because I was paying attention to my body. So that's a thing you can do. Like, let someone compliment you, and either in the moment, or if you're not comfortable doing so in the moment because it's like a social situation, you want to have a certain response, then later on, like, replay it to yourself and just like tune into your body and pay attention to how you feel. And like, you don't have to grade this, just tune in and pay attention. And also pay attention to other thoughts that come up, because they will come up. And you will learn, and naturally you will grow through this. Another thing you can do with people's compliments is write them down, especially the ones you struggle with. If you're struggling with them, it's usually because you need to understand something more about yourself, right? It's usually because you have this negative self-view, and because the compliments challenge that. Ironically, by being kind to you, they take you out of your comfort zone, because your comfort zone may be based on, I'm good at this, but I'm bad at that, right? And if they're like, no, actually, you're good at this, your worldview is upset and it's uncomfortable. So if you choose to put yourself out of your comfort zone by replaying this positive information to yourself frequently, you can really, really grow. And there's a lot of science around the fact that when we hear something repeatedly after a certain number of times, we believe it like in a deep way within, even if it's factually not true, which is not great, but it does help us because we know that we can, first of all, it pokes a hole in limiting beliefs we may have, right? Just because we believe it doesn't mean it's true. Secondly, it shows us that there is a path to cultivate new beliefs by replaying it for ourselves until we believe it is true. Oh, and this is really helpful, so I want to get it into the podcast. Brittany is saying, it's also helpful to think about your feelings about the person giving you the compliment. Do you respect them, and do you respect their judgment? If yes, it can be a bit easier to accept the compliment. I agree. Yes, I agree. Like, just simply like a review of your thoughts and feelings around the person, the content, the context of the situation can teach you a lot. Similarly to writing and keeping people's compliments top shelf for you, top of mind for you, is for you to start a running list of when things go better than expected, and also what you did to contribute that, like a pride list. If you've ever, like in a professional setting or a school setting, done a post-mortem meeting where you like pick apart something that happened, like maybe it was a performance, maybe it was a big launch, whatever, and you're like, post-mortem, we did this, what went well, what didn't go so well, how can we improve, right? Often the focuses of those meetings, appropriately, is to focus on what's not going well so that you can fix it, right? And that's helpful. And there's room for constructive criticism in our lives because it helps us grow. But here's a side to that. We are trained to think, we're trained this way by our society, that the only constructive information we can gather is criticism. We are trained to not see compliments and acknowledgement that's positive as constructive. We are trained to we have the word constructive criticism, and nobody says constructive compliment, even though such a thing truly does exist. We are trained to think that only criticism is meaningful and important for us to focus on. And in fact, it's very constructive to look at what we're doing well, and in some ways makes your life easier, not harder, right? Because if you're like, I'm really good at this, and this thing, these three things, and this thing that I didn't go so well because I'm not great at this fourth thing. If you could spend your whole life trying to get better at something you're crappy at, or you could spend your whole life getting better and better and better at the several things you're amazing at and become a master, right? If your choices are work hard on my flaws so that I can become like baseline kind of average at something, or work hard on my strengths so that I can become friggin' amazing, I hope you choose to become amazing. You know, like that's how people break records. That's how people lead amazing lives, is they lean into their strengths rather than focusing on their weaknesses. So it is constructive to look at what we're doing well and ask ourselves how we can lean into those strengths to keep growing according to what's easy and natural for us. So my suggestion to you is do the equivalent of a post-mortem meeting with yourself where you're like, what went well? And truly focus on what went well. Because our minds and bodies are naturally going to focus on what didn't go well. We're going to have a lot of theories and thoughts and feelings about them, but we are not trained to label positive information as important. So I'm training you to label positive information about yourself as important. Identify what went well. That feels like it's not worth a second thought. You're like, well, I can't do anything about that. Can't you though? If what went well is, well, you know, I don't feel like, for example, this presentation went very well because the technology was all over the place and I had to kind of vamp my way through a couple of the slides that didn't come up, and I had to, and like someone in the back of the room was kind of heckling me and that didn't go well because it really threw me off my game, right? Then we have a list of problems, right? If instead we're like, well, what went well? Well, your slides broke and you vamped your way through, right? Like that's a strength. Right? You're like, oh, there was a challenge and I faced it and I was able to vamp my way through. And then there was someone heckling you. And then even though you were off your game, you were like, well, I'm persevering. Even imperfectly, I'm completing the presentation, right? And then we can identify, oh, I have strengths. I have strengths that I keep going under pressure. I have strengths that if the thing that I thought was going to be like my training wheels isn't there, that I keep going anyway and figure it out in real time. I have strengths in that I'm willing to keep going, right? And now like different things will go well and badly for different people, right? But like, let's not miss the message. It's easy to feel like this was a failure when in fact, if a few things went wrong, I guarantee you some of your deepest strengths came out. And if you begin to change your view of yourself from I'm a fuck up because these things keep happening to me, to I'm really resourceful because even when shit gets fucked up, I keep going and find a way to make it work. That is invaluable. Let me tell you as a musician how I feel absolutely impenetrable when it comes to sound problems on stage. The reason that happens is because I've faced a million of them, because I've done a million gigs, because I've brought my own sound, and I've had every stupid thing go wrong, including stuff that was my fault. The time I went to a gig and I had to bring the sound, but I forgot to bring a microphone. Or the time that I went to a gig and I had to bring the sound, but I forgot to bring the power cord to my PA. That was my fault. And including things that were not my fault, like, oh, suddenly, like, this microphone stopped working. Suddenly the power went out in the venue and I didn't have it, you know, like, suddenly I broke a string on the guitar and the battery on my guitar ran out and I couldn't play the guitar for the rest of that and I didn't have another battery. You know, like having to deal with all of these things through trial and error. And most of the time, what has happened is I've found a way to like, the show must go on. I found a way to make the show work. And so now I'm not, first of all, I'm prepared for a lot more eventualities. So I'm like, okay, well, we bring backup batteries and we bring backup mics and we bring everything, right? I know I have the list. But secondly, I've been through enough things happening where my hair was on fire and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. And I made it through the show anyway. And there were people in the audience who literally didn't know anything was wrong, that I now have cultivated this sense of resourcefulness. Now, if I had only been through a few of those situations and they were early in my performing career, I might have cultivated an opposite sense. I might have cultivated a sense of like, oh gosh, something went wrong at this gig and this one and this one. I guess I'm just not cut out for this. I guess I'm just a fuck up. But luckily, it happened over the course of enough time that I was able to be like, wow, I can get through anything, right? And so we can choose either belief, and I'm going to encourage you to cultivate the beliefs that are about your strengths, that are about you making it through a challenge unscathed, that are about you being able to do it anyway. Another way to cultivate faith in yourself is to value yourself. Because, as Brittany said earlier, thank you for enhancing this podcast, Brittany. When somebody gives you a compliment, it's helpful to think about the feelings you have about the person giving you that compliment. Let's talk about how this plays into affirmations, which are very, very common in the New Age community, right? An affirmation is like a thing that you say to yourself. We all know what it is. It's a thing you say to yourself. Maybe you say it to yourself in the mirror, you know, and like in so many words, it's like, I'm great and I'm good at this. And gosh darn it, people like me. Like, I'm going to go get them today, right? They're like things that we say to ourselves to make ourselves believe better things about ourselves. Now, as Brittany said, how you feel about the person giving you a compliment matters. And if you're going to the mirror every day and giving yourself an affirmation that you don't feel, then you grow to feel like you're a liar, right? If you're like, I look great, and you look in the mirror and you're like, I hate everything about my stupid face. Now that's an unkind way to speak about yourself, and it might be kinder for you to go to the mirror and say, I look great. However, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to have this relationship of distrust with yourself. You're going to be like, you're telling me I look great, but I feel like I look like, you know, I feel like I look horrible. So there becomes cognitive dissonance instead of this growing faith in your, whatever, how you feel about your physical body, right? How you feel about how you look. And that's why it's helpful to have affirmations that are stepwise, you know, instead of saying like, I look great, you know, like you can have an affirmation that's like, there's nothing wrong with the way I look, you know, or I deserve love no matter how I look. You can like have affirmations that allow you to move your way towards feeling comfortable in your body if you're, you know, instead of trying to go from 0 to 100. And if we take the time to really let ourselves sort out like what happened and what did I do to better myself around it, if we give ourselves evidence rather than just giving ourselves unsupported statements, we can really begin to cultivate faith in ourselves, right? Do we trust a random stranger on the street who's like, listen, this is how it is. This just happened. If somebody knocked on your door and was like, did you know that the White House just burned down and we're in anarchy now? If some random person did that, what are the odds that you would believe that person, right? I'm an American. I'm making up crazy things that someone might say to you, right? Probably you're going to be like, I don't know about that, bub. And I don't think I should let you in my house. And maybe you check the news, you know what I mean, to see what actually happened. But you probably wouldn't believe it. You'd probably be like, this guy either is completely unhinged or he saw something and he's making something up, right? However, if a friend who you know to be intelligent came to you and was like, look at this interesting thing that just happened, you know, like, look at this, here's this news article CNN is covering it. It's kind of really amazing and it's very unexpected. Like, here it is on my phone. If they present you with evidence that something is happening, then you're a lot more likely to believe it, right? Both because they have some cachet with you, they're someone you know and trust, and because they're showing you like, see, I'm not just telling you this, I'm showing it to you. So when we show ourselves things, it's more helpful than affirming them to ourselves. When I'm just like, I'm great, I'm unstoppable on stage, nothing can throw me off my stride, that doesn't actually, like, that tells me something but doesn't show me something. When instead I'm like, hey, self, remember that time? Remember that time when you broke 3 strings on your guitar in a row and you still kept going and you finished the rest of the gig on piano, even though you'd only been playing piano for 6 months? But not only did you do it, you got a lot of compliments and a few people didn't even know anything went wrong. Remember that time? You really are unstoppable on stage. That evidence followed by a statement becomes much more believable. So when we on purpose go through what went well and how we overcame things, we can then cultivate this true sense of faith in ourselves, because we're just not like throwing affirmations at ourselves in the mirror. We're not like, you're great, you're unstoppable, which isn't, like, that's a feel-good statement, but I don't know if it reads as facts to our brain. But if we're like, remember this really hard time that you went through and you did this and this and this and you got to the other side. You had that experience and you remember it, and now you've been presented with some compelling evidence. So let's present ourselves as a practice with some compelling evidence of what we've done. And the other thing I'm going to suggest to you is begin making and keeping small promises to yourself for 2 reasons. Both because you should. That's a nice thing to do for yourself. That's how we build trust in a relationship, any relationship, right? We tell someone, I want to see you this Thursday. I'm going to cook you dinner. And then we see them this Thursday and then we cook them dinner and then we build trust, right? And with ourselves, we say, I'm going to do this thing, and then we do it, and that builds trust. And so making a small, keepable promise to yourself is a really easy way to get that compelling evidence for yourself. To say to yourself, and it's important that it be keepable, right? Making a goal for ourselves that feels like we can't do it is like screwing ourselves over from the get-go. But if we say to ourselves, I'm going to become a master violinist in 12 months, who knows if you're capable of doing that? If you've never picked up a musical instrument, I think probably not, but who knows, right? You might have a big natural aptitude, but most likely that's setting yourself up for some disappointment. But if you say to yourself, for the next week, I will practice violin for 20 minutes per day, that's a small and keepable promise. And then at the end of the week, you certainly will have gained some skill. And more importantly, you will have shown yourself that you have the dedication to keep gaining skill. That's why it's a more meaningful thing to say. And we have a culture, and I see this in like manifestation culture a lot, and like, but in general, like the dream big culture, which I'm all about big dreams. I love them. But we have this culture of like, go for gold, go for the big thing. Don't believe you can manifest $1,000. Believe you can manifest $100,000, see, believe it, have faith. And it's like, what really gives you faith is watching yourself move towards a goal and taking the baby steps, not a fluke, like, like maybe a financial windfall comes and you get some money sometime, but that doesn't build faith in yourself to create more money in your life. Instead, putting time in to build your career and earning a paycheck or the freelance equivalent of a paycheck is what teaches you, oh, I'm able to earn money, right? For example, when we make small, keepable promises to ourselves, we get undeniable progress towards our goals. And then we see a path and we're like, oh, I practiced violin for 20 minutes for 5 to 7 days, I'm now this much better of a violin player. And if I want to become a master violin player, whatever that means to you, right? If you're like, I want to be able to play this piece, or I want to be able to perform in front of an audience, or I want to be able to do whatever, then I have a path. I've practiced 20 minutes a day and I've gotten this good. So if I spend another week practicing, I can get even better. And if I continue to do that, I can grow. And then we have this self-concept that allows us to believe I can reach my goals because I've already made progress. It's evidence, right? We're not being asked to believe something crazy like that we can manifest $1 million or become a master anything overnight. Instead, we're being asked to believe that if we keep showing up, we can get better and better. And that is very provable. So making and keeping small promises to yourself, that's a huge way on a practical level to cultivate that faith in yourself. Now let's talk about spiritually. Something that we do when we talk about faith and we talk about prayer And often our perception of prayer, or I will say spell work, in the magical community, there are a lot of people who have made the assertion that prayer and spell work are similar ways of doing the same thing, basically like communicating with something with a power that feels bigger than you to try to get what you want, right? And there's an understanding that it's basically like there's a little Santa Claus element there, right? There's like, Santa, I want a pony. You know what I mean? When we pray, often people pray, especially people who don't pray all the time, when they're facing hardship, right? When it's like, I don't know what I believe in, but I got to get to this meeting or I'm going to get fired. Please help, right? Those kind of desperate prayers. Or even when we pray and it's not about a hardship in the moment, it's like this sense of praying for like, please, whatever, please help me see this week through that's challenging. Please help me continue to put food on the table. Please help me continue to do this. There's nothing wrong with those prayers. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And I'm going to just say, whether you believe in anything or not, I know people who believe in nothing and pray, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've been one of them. There's nothing wrong with that because there are things in life that we do not have control over. And it may be emotionally and spiritually helpful for us to like ask someone else to have our back about it, right? In the same way, like if you're a kid, you don't have control over what is going to happen at school, and you might ask your teacher for help, or you might ask your mom for help, right? There's nothing wrong with asking for help. But I'm going to suggest that when we pray, when we have our spiritual practice, we ask how we can build ourselves up. How can I face this? Right? There's also a phrase that I used to hear all the time growing up, which is God helps those who help themselves. And getting out of the fact that I just generally don't like phrase with the word God in them because it hits a bunch of buttons for me that I don't like it. It's still a useful phrase, right? It's this belief that if I show up and do my best, that I might get a little extra help, right? That's a useful belief, I think, to cultivate, to be like, well, I'll do what I can and I will just hope God, the universe, whatever, luck takes care of the rest, but at least I'm doing what I can. That's useful. It gets you moving. And what if we chose to make our prayer or our spell work or our spiritual practice about how can I help myself? Show me what I need to understand to better myself. Show me where I need to do the work. Show me. Like, what if it was show me rather than do it for me, right? I think there's a lot of magic and a lot of prayer that's like, please do this for me. I don't know what to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everyone in their life has felt like that's the best they have in that moment. But what if it was show me how to do this? Because here's another cliche. We're just talking about a lot of cliches today. You give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, you feed him for life, and, possibly depopulate the oceans, depending on how hungry he is. Anyway, so what if our prayers and our spell work were centered on our growth? What if instead of saying, please help me make X number of dollars this year, please help me make sure I can pay my rent this month, what if instead we were like, show me what I need to learn in order to earn more? What a powerful idea that that's something we could work towards, learning how to earn more instead of just hoping that Sky Daddy would save us if we didn't happen to earn enough one week, right? What a powerful idea to think like there's a growth mentality here. So we can adjust our asks to whatever we believe in, our guides, a deity, spirit, the tarot, right? We can make our asks be less about please do this for me and more about please show me how I can do this for myself. And we can begin to cultivate faith in ourselves because we will get some kind of an answer, especially if we're doing divination, right? The tarot is going to tell you something and it allows you to take action in an area where you previously did not feel you could take action. So that's powerful. I'm also spiritually going to recommend, and this is more, it's psychospiritual, it's bothy, which a lot of things are, but like, what if we did a relationship reading with ourselves? Like, I really recommend allowing yourself to be the other person in the room because your relationship with yourself is its own thing, right? I'm into, as you know, on this podcast, I talk about talking to yourself and I talk about like talking to nobody. And it's like, I think it's helpful. What if we do a relationship reading for ourselves? What if we ask the tarot, how can I improve my relationship with myself? What's blocking me from having faith in myself around this, and how can I improve it? Right? And that's also more meaningful. For example, if we're cultivating faith in ourselves, if we believe we're bad at something, we've just talked about why it's not helpful to just give us ourselves an affirmation like, actually, I'm great at it. Like, that's not helpful. We're not going to buy it. Right? When I really grew up feeling like, and being made to feel like I was like a social idiot. Again, not something I would say to anyone, but I obviously feel comfortable saying it about myself, and that shows me that I still have more to learn on that, right? I grew up being made to feel like socially I just couldn't hack it. And like that was a weak point in me, right? And not something I was any good at. And it was a problem. It was a problem part of who I was, right? And I had to adopt over time a growth mentality. And it started very small. It started with there's got to be someone out there who can tolerate me. And that doesn't sound great, but that was where I could get to. Because me looking in the mirror every day and saying people like me wasn't gonna cut it, because it would set off my bullshit radar instantly, right? But instead, I could have, for example, done a reading with the tarot, like what's blocking my self-concept around making friends. I could have asked the tarot for that. I could have asked for divine guidance of some kind, in whatever I believed in, different things at different times in my life. Show me, right? Like, show me how to connect with people in the way I need to connect with them. Show me what I need to learn and understand better. And that as a spiritual practice would have allowed me to have some growth there in an area where I didn't know the next step. Moving towards neutrality is really helpful, right? If we feel something negative about ourselves. Another powerful comment from Brittany, which is why I love doing these as a live broadcast, even though sometimes they're a hot mess, technologically. But if we are at a crossroads where we're like, I want to improve something about my life or about my relationship with myself, and I just don't know how, asking for help in a spiritual sense can be the next step if we don't have a next step, right? If our next step is, I don't know, I got nothing, I just feel terrible about this and I feel terrible at it and I don't know how to not, right? Then a good next step is to consult the cards. Like, that's where spiritual practice comes into play. And it's another useful belief, right? Because the belief there is, even when I'm out of ideas, I can pray about it. Even when I'm out of ideas, there's still someone or something I can ask. Even if that someone or something is your higher self, for example, or your best self, right? Even if you're going to sleep at night and saying, best self, please show me the path, right? Which doesn't require you to have belief in a deity, because not everyone does, and it's not everyone's job to. It's a useful belief to believe that when you're out of answers, your spirituality can be an answer. And that's a big reason that spirituality has become a big part of my life, because it's useful. It's been useful to me at times in my life when I'm like, I don't know how to fix this problem, to believe that I at least had the next step of asking. And that's why I won't hate on those prayers that are like, please help me. But I'm going to even say, take it a step better and ask, please help me figure this out. Because first of all, there's a little affirmation in there. It implies that you're capable of figuring it out in a way that will probably get through your bullshit radar. And secondly, it gives you something to believe in. It makes room in your mind for the possibility that it is figure outable. And that is the first step sometimes. As Brittany just said in the chat, moving towards neutrality, right? When we're like, I'm horrible about this, I'll never figure it out. If we move towards neutrality, a truly neutral statement might be, I may or may not ever figure this out, which is better than I'll never figure it out, right? And so, like, taking those baby steps towards believing that maybe, possibly, just maybe we could do a thing will help us cultivate that faith in ourselves. And by the way, I do have a self-care reading that I've developed around this stuff. And if you are one of my $5 and up patrons, I'm going to share that reading with you in the bonus episode. That's going to be our bonus episode for this month. Okay. We're moving into Witch, You Got This. This is the part of the podcast where I give you one practical idea that you can implement in your practice right this minute. Like, it's a takeaway, it's a try this at home part of the podcast, and I invite you to try this at home. Do a 7-day self-trust spell. I love this idea. I love it being 7 days because we can do anything for 7 days. It's not so long that it's crazy, right? And we can time it, right? If we have a busy 7 days, when we start it maybe the day after, you know what I mean? But we do a 7-day self-trust spell. First of all, it's a small, keepable promise to yourself, right? So we're hitting that. It's a small, keepable promise to show up for something for 7 days in a row. And what we can do in the self-trust spell, we might gather some accoutrements like a pink candle or some rose quartz, some things that make us feel kind of lovey about ourselves. But you can do this with or without those things. You can just, like, those things set the scene to tell you this is a spell, this is a ritual. Those are useful. So do whatever that means to you. For some people, it's lighting a candle. For some people, it's like getting into a bath. For some people, it's meditating for a time, just focusing on deepening their breath before they begin. Right? Do what makes you feel like it's ritual. For some people, it's involving deities or guides. And every day for 7 days, what we're doing in our self-trust spell is very practical. We are going to take pen to paper and write down in your own handwriting what you did well that day. Write down how you handled a difficult situation with whatever you had available, right? Maybe it wasn't perfect, but you got through it. How you showed up for yourself and how you showed up for your values. And at the end of each day, after you've written down the things you did well, the things that you handled even though they were hard, the things that you got through even though you didn't know if you could, each day we'll say to ourselves, we'll put our hands over our hearts, may I remember to celebrate and honor my strengths. May I learn once and for all that I am the solution to any problem that comes my way. May I have my own back. And then we close the ritual. It's a good time to blow out a candle if you're candling, or a good time to do whatever, like thank anyone for participating, including yourself. That's a very small, easy ritual you can do for 7 days. You can arrange a time to show up for yourself. It can be different times if you have a different schedule, just as long as you've shown up for yourself and put pen to paper and write down what you did well today. And at the end of 7 days, 2 things will happen. You will have concrete evidence of how you can get through different things and how you have strengths. And also you will have made and kept a promise to yourself, and you will have shown yourself that you're worth keeping a promise to for 7 days. So naturally we have more faith. So try this at home. Try a 7-day self-trust spell. Let me know how it goes for you. I really want to thank you for spending your time with me today. If you like this podcast, please rate it, please review it wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could take a moment to share it with someone who you think might be interested, I'd be very grateful. If you want to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits, you can do so. You can do so at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, if you have a topic you'd like to see me discuss, you can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com, and you can follow me on social media at Sassafras Tarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. I chose 2 very difficult words to spell as my brand name. You can spell that SassafrasTarot, and if you pop those words into a search bar, you will find me. If you'd like to order a reading from me, you can do so at etsy.com/shop/Sassafras Tarot. As always, I'm going to take you out with a song. If you like it, you can search for me wherever you listen to music. My name is Rorie Kelly, RorieKelly. You can also visit my website, roriekelly.com, or find me on your social media site, whatever your favorite social media site is. And I appreciate you listening. I am going to share with you. I've decided to start sharing recorded music at the end of these, both because I think that's a nicer experience for you than a live performance, and it's a nicer experience for me because often at the end of a podcast, my voice is a little bit tired from talking for an hour and change. So I'm going to share with you I'm going through my share screen thing. I'm going to share with you a song called I Got This. Which is a song that I really wrote to myself to remind myself that I could have an influence on my dreams. Here we go. Let me know if you can see and hear.
I wanna be the the future of a movement. All my life been leading up to this. I wanna be that important to someone. I got the kiss, I got the kiss. You wanna see me just change, change, change. You wanna love me just rearrange. I wanna see you just smile at me, yeah. No corrections, no complaints. Everything I want to do, I got inside of me, inside of me. Everything I got to do, I got in front of me, in front of me. I got this. I got it on my own. I wanna be right square in the moment, meditating like it's Buddha night. But I don't think it's desire that's killing us. It's the taint of self-denial. I wanna lose all that shame, shame, shame. I want the power of rearrange. I wanna see a true partnership, yeah. All connected, not the same. Everything I want to do, I got inside of me, inside of me. Everything I got to do, I got in front of me, in front of me. I got this. I got it on my own. Oh. I wanna show you the light, my sunshine. I wanna teach you how to be unsure. I wanna hold out my hand to you, show you things you've never seen before. I wanna see us both change, change, change. Thinking so hard it hurts our brains. I wanna see you just smile at me, yeah. No corrections, no complaints. Everything I want to do, I got inside of me, inside of me. Everything I want to do, I got in front of me, in front of me. I got this. I got it on my own. Everything I want to do, I got inside of me, inside of me. Everything I got to do, I got in front of me, in front of me. I got this. I got it all.